In this video, I'm going to show you a lineup of some of my favorite photos I got in the Faroe Islands in 2019 that I haven't shown in any of my videos yet. Some of them I have shown on Instagram and some of them are brand new. I will do so by breaking them down individually and talk about light and atmosphere and composition. And if you want to know more about composition after this video, I have an ebook on exactly that subject. So I have a free version you can try out first before you go ahead and buy the full version. There are links down in the description to these. But without further ado, let's get to it. So let's start back in March, where I did a workshop with Nigel. And this is just a super simple photo, very simple color palette. We have the browns, we have the blues, and a little bit of gray in the sky. And what you see here is the end of the island Vaga, and just underneath it, Dranganir. And this is just so over the top epic. It's a drone perspective, and there's just like one focal point, or maybe two focal points, the two islands here, and yeah, it is what it is. Super simple, straight on, no bullshit, just epic. Along the ridge line you can actually see some small black dots, and those are people, and it just goes to show how big this place is. The next shot here is from the top of Funningur, and it is just so atmospheric. We had a lot of clouds coming in all the time, but they did break up from time to time. And James wanted to get down here and stand in the foreground, and I managed to get this kind of long lens shot. It's probably shot at like 70mm or something like that. And even though James is a relatively tall person, this just shows so much scale. And we have the atmosphere with the clouds, which are just like beautiful. I really like this shot. And this one is from the top of Klakur, looking towards, you can see down here on the right, is the southern end of Kalsoy. And we have a settlement on the background island, which is Eysturoy. And we have these beautiful sunbeams coming in and lighting up the clouds and just the side there and southern tip of Kalsoy. I actually have a vertical composition too, and I think I prefer the vertical composition even though I cut out more of the sunbeams. But I think this is a bit more balanced, even though we have this big darker part of the photo, which is the island. It is kind of balanced visually by the sunbeams coming in from the right. It's a very simple photo, and that is really what I like, is just to simplify the photos as much as possible, yet still make them very, like, over the top epic. And here's just a straight on shot of Mykines. And this is kind of interesting because the sun was on its way down, and as you can see, it's still behind the clouds, but because its light is reflected off on the water surface and up underneath the clouds, we do get a lot of color underneath the clouds, which looks really nice. And as you can see, we have like lines in the clouds, and I tried to line up those lines with the lines in the waves. So we have like these parallel lines which are reflected in each other, and then the island just straight in the middle. Beautiful, simple, yet again over the top epic shot. And this one here from the famous Trælanipa. I really like this shot, but I do have some buts with it. So we had these massive waves coming in, and when I say they are massive, they are really, really big. So when you compare to this shot here, and you can see how big these cliff walls are. This specific shot is from a workshop I did later with Nick Page, but it's just to show how big these cliff walls are. And this place is actually one of the lower places. So when we go back to this place, you can really see how far up these waves come, like half the way up this cliff wall. And when we compare again to the Nick Page photo, those are some really big waves. And that's kind of the problem with this photo, that the cliffs are so huge that even huge waves look small. So you have different kinds of scale that are actually working against each other. And that's a very important thing in landscape photography when you want to show a big scene, is to not have the different big elements to fight each other. And when I say fight each other, I mean that one of the big elements are making the other big element look small. We see the same thing when you photograph northern lights above a glacier or something like that. The glacier is in itself so huge, but if you introduce northern lights above it, then the northern lights will probably be so big that they make the glacier look small. So you don't really get a proper sense of scale, and that's the problem I have with this one photo here. It is beyond epic, but it makes the waves look fairly small when they're really not. So we're just jumping 2 weeks ahead. In the first week of April, I was also up here hosting a private workshop. And this one shot here, you've probably seen the one I have where the sun comes in from the side. And that is probably my favorite of this photo and the other photo. But the problem with that other photo is that it becomes fairly complex, even though it is a beautiful shot. This one here, on the other hand, has a way simpler color palette. We have the browns and the grays, and that's about it. And we have, of course, the very strong leading line, the wet road, which gets the light reflected from the background. So it really makes the road pop out. And the fun thing is with leading lines, and especially in this particular photo, I usually try to make my leading lines come from one of the lower corners. But in this particular case, it doesn't really work well. I can warp the road, but yeah, for me that would be too much, warping this one road. So yeah, leading lines and generally visual flow is something I talk a lot about in my ebook. So this particular shot here, it was probably the most windy I've ever experienced in the Faroe Islands, and also the shot I got where I actually felt the most unsafe in the Faroe Islands. And the wind was simply just so strong coming from behind me that it was almost pushing me over the ridge. But the shot was just so great, having all this beautiful light coming in. I like the shot as an overview shot. I don't really think there's that much strong of a focal point. It's well balanced visually with the ridge down here in the bottom, looking towards Vaga, the Trollkon finger on one side, and then we have the light coming in from the other. So overall, again, a big epic shot with great lights. But again, I would say that the focal point of the photo is a little bit like, what is the focal point? So this one here, there's no doubt about what the focal point is, and that's obviously the church here. And this is from Saxon. And what Saxon is so amazing for is that you can have like a huge sunbeam coming in from the side during sunset around the equinoxes. And it just lights up this entire valley. And that was exactly what happened here. We just had this over the top amazing light. A simple shot with the mountains in the background and the church straight there in front. And the last shot from my April adventure is here from Vidoy, which is the northernmost island. Have me standing down there in front, and we just had these amazing clouds on the island here in the background and a little bit of sunbeams coming down. Just again shows the scale and just how big the Faroe Islands are. This is actually one of my favorite adventure-ish photos where I really try to show a lot of scale, and again a very simple color palette with the browns and blues and the grays in the sky. So we jump ahead to summer, and here me up in the largest waterfall in the Faroe Islands, and just a long lens straight on to catch these winds whirling the water around. Over the top epic, and I actually purposely cut the very top of the waterfall so that it looks as if the waterfall is taller, because it is just where the background waterfall comes down where I cropped it. So in that way we focus more on the scale of the waterfall and kind of unconsciously think that the waterfall is larger on the top than it is. It is way larger in the bottom, but zooming all the way in and getting all these details makes such a difference. And here also a very minimalistic photo with a lot of atmosphere and this fun cloud which is like covering the two iconic rocks or cliffs. down here in the bottom, which are Rising and Kelling. Again, a shot where it's very, very hard to determine what is the scale of what you're looking at, because these two rocks here in the bottom are about 70 meters tall. So just imagine how tall the cliff here by the side is. A huge, huge place. So it's not for the scale you want to watch this photo, but just the minimalist and mood. That's what makes this one photo strong. So this is kind of a fun photo because we had a lot of clouds coming in, and just at one point it kind of cleared, so we got a little bit of sun in the background. And I found this little collection of stones or rocks here in the foreground, which kind of emulates how the clouds are above the top of the mountain. And it makes like this crescent moon or curve through the photo that I really like. In that way, it's kind of a strong composition, this geometrical element through the photo. And when you combine that with great light and a cool mountain in the background, it just makes for a cool and epic photo. And again here from the top of Klakur on Bordøy. What I aimed for in this photo was to actually get a little bit lower perspective. You can get a higher perspective and you can get this perspective. Doing like this, I get less negative space in the fjord, and I get me standing there a little bit larger in the photo. So this is more of an adventure photo than it is actually to show the scale. We spent around 3 to 4 hours up here. And when the sun was setting, it just threw all these beautiful sunbeams through the photo. Just an absolutely spectacular location. And this is probably my most Instagrammable photo I've got from the Faroe Islands. So very simple, one focal point, which is interesting to look at because it's kind of an interesting house. Straight on, balance, put it straight in the middle. Good depth with the foreground grass and the house in the middle ground, and then up into the background mountains. And this one from Tjørnvik is actually an upgrade to an older photo I got here. But the problem with the older photo was that it was a little bit shaken. So I really wanted to go back and get an upgrade to that photo, which were just tack sharp. And I got this with this one. So this little waterfall here with a short long exposure, probably around 1/3 of a second or something like that. And then just leading the eye into the background down to Tjørnvik, the settlement here in the background, and then up onto Rising and Kellingen in the background. And you can probably see this is the same day as the earlier photo from this place with the 2 sea stacks there in the background. I also have an even simpler, I would say, vertical version of this. This is it's the same waterfall, just a little bit different angle and perspective to it. And this is actually shot at f/22 to get everything in focus from front to back. It's a tiny bit soft, but I would actually argue that it's not too bad. Generally, I say don't shoot above f/16, but in this particular case, I just went for the f/22 shot just to make sure I got it all straight on and yeah, very simple. I really also like here how the color palette, the dark and moody atmosphere, which is so typical for the Faroe Islands. And again, compositionally, just the exact same. Strong foreground, strong depth. And we have the waterfall leading the eye into the valley here in the background, the settlement Tjørnvik, and then up onto Rising and Kelling in the background. So another shot from the top of Funningur, and I really like this photo here with the dapple light in the background. So it's actually fun with this shot because I uploaded 2 versions to Instagram and asked what people liked the most. I had no doubt that I preferred this one here, but I also had a version where the foreground was lit. And the vast majority of people watching it on Instagram preferred this version too here. So in that way, the foreground doesn't take up too much attention, but you still get this adventure feeling to it with the person standing down here posing. And then we have the dapple light in the background that drags the attention into the background and the fjord. So this is actually quite a fun photo. Me and Nick Page were standing in the famous Garsadalur, and this is the waterfall in Garsadalur. And we were asking each other, what would Thomas Heaton do here? And I suggested that he would probably put on a long lens and just zoom in and get like a simple shot of the waterfall. So this is my thoughts on what Thomas Heaton would do. He would probably not tone it this blue as I've done, but yeah, just straight on version. I actually kind of like it. It's very simple, and yeah, just waterfall, and I like these concentric circles that are made down in the ocean. And this shot here is also from me and Nick's workshop up there. And we just got probably the best sunset I've had in Gaza da Lua ever. Finally got some beautiful red clouds that were just like lit up from underneath by the sunset. And this is, as you can see, from the lower perspective, so you can't see the town. And I really like that because it creates a nice depth to the photo, including these rocks here in the foreground, leading up into the background, the waterfall and the iconic mountain there in the background. But this was not the best photo I got from this day. This one here is probably my favorite from that day. It's taken a little bit earlier, but there's just a little bit more atmosphere. The light is a little bit more glowy. It catches more of the atmosphere and all the moist particles in the air and lights up the foreground. So I do think that this is probably one of my favorite photos from the Faroe Islands in 2019, and I will just end this presentation before it gets too long with this shot here. So strong foreground leading into the background. We have the waterfall, which stands out, which is the focal point, and then we have the mountains and the atmosphere in the background with some great light. And yeah, again, it's a simple photo from a very complex scene, and I really strive to do that. Simplify, simplify, simplify. So I hope you enjoyed this little presentation of photos from the Faroe Islands. As I said, if you want to know even more about composition, be sure to check out my ebook down in the description. It's also, with the release of this video, Black Friday, Cyber Monday-ish, whatever it's called in the US. So I have 33% off on all my Photoshop tutorials, if that's of any interest. Again, links down in the description. And finally, usually I don't release 2 videos a week, but I will see what I can do here in December. There might be more than 1 video a week. So yeah, it's a little bit up in the air right now, but I do want to produce a bit more content for this channel. So yeah, stay tuned. Be sure to hit that bell icon down in the subscription tab, because that's the only way where you can actually get a notification whenever I upload a new video. And if it's a little bit off schedule, then you might miss it, and we wouldn't want that, would we? So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I would highly appreciate both a like and a comment.